Welcome everybody to the Creative Challenge, changing strategies to meet new consumer needs. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Mozezioni, CEO of Clinch. Clinch is an AI creative solution that enables brands to personalize digital and video campaigns. I have two amazing creative and technology leaders here with me today. Sam Deutsch, Global Marketing Director, Data Strategy at Anheuser-Busch InBev, and Kyle Mathura, SVP of Growth at MediaMonks. Welcome, guys. I hope you got yourself equipped with the right drinks, Johan. And guys, I want to start with the fact that we are living during an unprecedented moment in time. So no brand anticipated this, obviously, or has a roadmap for what's coming. What worked yesterday and what was planned for tomorrow is obviously no longer relevant. Decisions that took maybe weeks to make and months to execute are not now being done in hours, right? Everything is fast, everything has to be rapid. Data has never been more important, but also creativity. When we look at that, empathy, authenticity are suddenly, one of the biggest brand requirements. And brands quickly learn that personal connection between them and their individual consumer has to be real, right? And it can be just like a marketing slogan. So, when you look at it, one bad decision that they make can have a major impact on their customer loyalty. And with this dramatic yet realistic backdrop, I want to turn the mic to Sam. As in 45 days, InBev, which would mainly consider itself a B2B company, spending the bulk of its effort marketing to bars and retailers, made an incredible consumer pivot. From Clinch standpoint, as your DCO partner, I can highlight a huge campaign in Latin America to save the local bars, serving localized ads to, I would say, over 15,000 bar locations, driving people to get delivery or pickup from the favorite bar, just to help keep the bars in business.
Sure. Yeah. So I think looking back at the past couple months, right, there's been massive acceleration and change in our business, and it strikes back from kind of two things about our company goal, right? Not to harp on what anyone can find on a website, right? But our goal is to bring people together, right? That's what we do as a business. And to note to your point about who we market to, and we look at our principles, the consumer's always been the boss. It's one of our 10 principles if you look it up online at ABI. That being said, we knew we had to kind of figure out what we could do to help those communities, those people that we rely on, whether they're internal or external consumers themselves, or the businesses that help us get our products to those communities, right? Those bars, those supermarkets, et cetera, right? So we had to look at how we could do that. And the first way we did it is obviously tied to our goal, right? How do we help people in this trying time, whether that's through entertainment, whether that's through things like our Bud Light initiatives, our concerts at home, Brahma in Brazil, doing live streaming, huge scale there in terms of the Sertanejo concerts they're doing. How can we kind of bring that community, that feeling of ease and the enjoyment into their lives in a very challenging time? But also we had to think about leveraging our infrastructure, right? Both from a marketing perspective and just from supply chain. We've done some really positive initiatives in building masks in Brazil. We actually partnered with local hospitals in Sao Paulo to extend and build a new hospital down there. We are doing some small things, as small as baking bread out of leftover product from our beers, or even larger as transitioning some of our factories into hand sanitizer facilities for the future, right? But going back to your point as to like leveraging data and making this consumer first, echoing very in alignment that everything that we look at now, if the data infrastructure, if our reporting, if our measurement isn't up to speed, it's very hard for us to understand what's actually driving an impact, what can we do better, and how can we help more people. So I like to say that this time, and there was a great political cartoon on this that showed people in a boardroom talking about digital transformation and how long it's going to take, and there was a wrecking ball called COVID-19 about to smash down the window, right? And that's to an extent what we're dealing with. We have all these plans. We have great partnerships now with our own internal incubator group of ZX Ventures, right, that we own, that are really helping us in some places. That is our e-commerce channel to connect with people, to actually get them what they need, products, and also using that infrastructure to get them other things besides beer, right? Whether it's water that we donate, just supplies in general, right? So we've had to step up our game in getting access to information and the data pipelines and technology in place so that we can understand not only what's driving an impact, but what's resonating as well. So we can think about what the consumer might need next, or what they might want next, or how they want to communicate with us moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And just, you know, for our audience, I would say if there's a place for a Q&A, and we'll have time later on to actually ask different questions for everything that we're talking about. So please go ahead and submit your questions. We'll try to answer all of them as much as we can. So Kyle, you know, just to relate to what Sam just said, you know, you guys are working with a lot of companies like Nike and pharma brands. What have you seen that, I mean, how those brands react? What they see now, how they plan for the future?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's a huge range of different verticals, industries that we're working with, that we're lucky enough to call our clients. And we've seen a vast array of different reactions and then different actions. So I think, you know, we've sort of throughout this tried to classify everything as like now, near, and next, and sort of trying to delineate sort of what is like crisis mode, what is our sort of transitional new normal for now, and then what is our sort of future state new normal. And we're operating in all of those sort of capacities for different clients. You mentioned Nike. We did a very cool live stream series, bringing famous trainers into people's homes. That was like very, very instinctive. Like, so they were very quick off the bat. It's interesting to see the different pivots, because some folks have been very, very cautious and have decided to not only to not do any advertising, like for example, ABI are not doing advertising per se, but they're doing an awful lot of other great initiatives in their place. But some clients are doing absolutely nothing and playing it very safe. Other clients are going completely all in, especially, you know, the certain products and services have shot up in terms of demand. So they're responding to that. So it makes perfect sense. In the case of pharma, it's an interesting one, because historically it's been, you know, it's its own universe. It's super analog. And so what we've seen with our pharma clients is a need to really like accelerate digital transformation in a way that, it's funny, Sam mentioned it, you know, the wrecking ball, it's so true. That, you know, the navel gazing and the, you know, one day we'll do this, or, you know, aspirational conversations have become like, if we don't do this, we don't survive. So to give an example of that, you know, we work with a pharmaceutical company who have no mechanism for their sales reps to have any kind of contact with their healthcare providers other than, you know, face-to-face meetings. So we're building a tool, like a platform, to connect them virtually, to be able to share research, patient information, information on drugs, and obviously to order different products and services between themselves, and not just COVID related, but all the other facets of healthcare, which are kind of being overlooked at the moment. So it's really, really important from that point of view as well. And yeah, just a really, really interesting time for us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, back to what Sam said and Kyle, what you just said, I mean, we understand that advertising is not the same, right? It's like when you look at advertising, all those brand initiatives, you know, creating sanitizers and distributing water and making people laugh at times of, you know, time during the COVID-19. All that recognition that's being attached to the brand, this is advertising just in a completely different form. Okay, and one of the things that we've talked about as a group is not just how brands are looking at advertising these days, which is a completely different aspect and point of view, but also the priorities in the roadmap that have completely changed. And things that may have been in the bottom of the list as a nice to have, and this is something we're gonna do in the future, now are suddenly become a top priority and a must have, and not only a must have now, okay? You know, an example is that combination of technology, creativity, relevant messaging at scale. How important is that tech stack? And how do you think that it is changing the brand setting these days?
I think in the short term, we realized, or we're realizing that the idea of national advertising is still crucially important, but there are going to be such differences and disparity into how people are perceiving the next stages of this pandemic, right? There are going to be those who are comfortable with going out, who are longing to go out, those who are protesting to go out. There are going to be those who are still fearful for some time, right? So, I'm sorry. So we have to be cognizant of that disparity that's coming our way. So obviously one way of understanding that is looking into research, whether it's primary research or quant, whatever that might be. Also, it's just connecting with consumers and also using the data that's available to you, whether it's first, second, or third party data, right? So advertising is I wouldn't say, by no means is it drastically historically changing, right? I think it's just that we have this level of sensitivity now that is going to play out longer, that requires us to be even closer to the consumer and understand the real empathy for the consumer, right? We can't go speaking to, let's use the United States as an example. We can't go speaking to some areas of the country that are going to be more inclined or predisposed to this pandemic than others the same way. It's just a reality. We have to think about our POCs, the bars that we sell to. There are going to be some that need product, need marketing material, need our partnership now more than ever before to stay afloat, but also just because they're available to actually go and sell, while others, they're still shut down, right? So I think the tech stack is critical in this, and the data into the tech stack is just as important, right? And having the two together will allow marketers at small companies, large companies, global, multinational, or just one country, really make the right decisions on how to communicate when, how often, with what message. We've all talked about personalization at scale, one-to-one messaging. DCO is so important. And I think, Oz, to your point, like it might not have been something that you have to flip the switch on more campaigns in the past, but now we're going to start, I think, seeing across a number of different verticals in the advertising industry that these type of tools are going to be more relevant now because of those sensitivities that we have to be cognizant of as marketers.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, Kyle, you want to chip in on your?
I always want to chip in. Yeah, so I think from our side, sort of from a sort of production standpoint, again, to reference this sort of mantra that we've been sort of classifying things with in terms of now, near, next, I would say like the now was like, oh my God, like what type of work and messaging and experiences can we create like today, this week? And then we sort of segued into the near, which is like, okay, we're starting to adapt to, you know, the new limitations and parameters we have. And so, I think we're still within that sort of near period. And, you know, for us, a great example of that is we've developed this whole safe studio concept, which is basically like a super locked down studio facility that we already owned, but we basically made it sort of COVID friendly, or at least among a lot of sort of pretty well recognized sort of best practice guidelines in terms of COVID. So, you know, we have clients in one room, all remotely, preferably. Sorry, and we have everything is in-house. So we own our equipment. We have staff photographers, line producers, everything like that. So it's really seamless to be able to sort of produce content safely, at least sort of more modest creative. So for example, yeah, product photography, tabletop, stills, you know, some set building and some live action, but, you know, minimal. And then I think our next is going to be about how do we do sort of more elaborate, say, location-based live action? How do we bring experiential back? So, you know, we're looking at, you know, basically trying to broaden our world, but we have to do it so drastically. And I think to the point about location, sorry, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that everywhere is at a different stage in terms of, you know, not just the virus, but in terms of the parameters around that. And the creative needs to match that as well. But I mean, before we get into that, I think the production limitations are very, very real. So we're going to have to pivot our whole sort of working process to where we're able to actually get things done. But, you know, the MediaMonks, as an example, you know, we've got a very distributed, very global team. We're all over the world, and we pretty much live in Google Hangouts anyway. So actually, on the Monday that our office is closed, it was just kind of like business as usual. And we sort of segued into that very, very quickly. Whereas I think other companies sort of similar to ourselves maybe had a little bit more of a sort of a struggle transitioning out of a sort of physical office, but we were already, you know, pretty virtual in terms of how we work with each other.
Yeah, I mean, what I really like about this, you know, this conversation is that we have the triangle of the brand, the production, and the execution eventually to the digital channels. And obviously we worked together before, and now we have to look real quickly at how we work in a completely different environment in different, you know, time frames. Okay, and sometimes even different KPIs and different objectives. And the way I see it, and you guys both touch on those things, is when planning and activating campaigns for the brands today, there are three things that, again, maybe were considered before, but now gets like the front stage, right? Which are location, time, and context. These three things are crucial, because New York is not Minnesota, right? And especially for global brands, even the US is not another country in Europe and Latin America. You have to look at the stages and the progress in each country and understand how consumers are feeling and behaving in each location. Last week is not this week. If last week people were happy with empathy and advertising, we're all in this together, this week they probably, you know, everybody's talking to them this way. And now they look at, okay, you know, what is the consumer utility, the way we like to call it? It's like, what value do you give me that I can actually work with? Okay, and I think this is an opportunity for brands to actually pick it up, provide value, show the initiative that they're doing, make that connection to their consumer a lot more personalized and relevant and real than just, you know, the ordinary, casual ways of communication that we knew before COVID-19.
Yeah, I think right now and moving forward on that point, I mean, there's obviously we're not saying that there's a seismic shift, that it's a one size fits all model, right? There's still a need and a purpose for mass reach media. There's still a need for mass reach but personalized, and there's still a need for local media, right? And every country and every region is going to have the optimal means of trying to look into that and allocate accordingly. But I think how we allocate, how we look into the metrics to help us determine what's working, what's not, the need for common standardization and kind of reporting at the highest levels of this has never been more important, right? Because allocation, resource allocation, whether it's because of the virus or just because of the future economy, right, things of that nature, it's going to be more scrutinized now than ever before. So we have to be making the right decisions. We have to not just be going off of our instinct alone or off of some survey polls alone. We need real feedback in real time, as close to live as possible, right? And we need clear understandings and set metrics as to what is it we're specifically looking to achieve, right? There is no ambiguity, will not work and fly in this new world as much as it has in the past, right? For brands, for media teams, for media agencies, for creative agencies, right? It needs to be more clear as to what explicitly we're trying to achieve when we put our resources down to create great content to provide that utility for consumers, right? We talked about the trade-off in utility for data for some time now, right? That's been the hot trend over the past couple of years, that if you're going to give me an email address, if you're going to give me your phone number, what is that company giving you back in return? Is it a contest? Is it a newsletter? Is it discounts? The question will be, I mean, and this has been brought up in other places, how does time play into this with advertising, and how do we make sure that we're relevant, we're tangible to what that consumer, that potential purchaser is wanting to see or willing to see at that time, with all the new outlets and the changes in media behavior we're seeing, right? With streaming going up at the same time, with all TV, local TV really rising. There's more opportunity now, but we just have to be really, really smart about how we're determining what is the right thing to invest behind, and what might be something that we let slide onto the darkness potentially.
Yeah, I mean that all makes so much sense, and I think sort of from thinking about this from a sort of creative standpoint, and Oz, going back to your point, and we talked about location, context, the cycle, emotional cycles of, as you said, empathy versus utility versus, any other sort of context that brands are doing. I think one of the things that's been interesting about this is it's been such a leveler for all people to kind of, and all brands to really sort of start again. And there's a lot of scrutiny. Everybody's at home. Everybody is on social media a lot more. So I think there's a lot more following, and there's a lot of uniformity, I think, in the industry. And so I think brands that are doing things that are genuinely different are standing out, and brands that are leading rather than following. I think that, mass creative, of course, has to play a role because, we still have global brands, we still have shared messaging, and fundamentally we still need economies of scale to make things for the world. But, for example, in the past where we, taking an example with ABI, where we might have either in post or live action, shot a version of a spot with a can and with a bottle as two different versions. Now we might be shooting talent with mask and without a mask, and sort of starting to consider things like that to resonate with different markets who are at different stages in their whole sort of COVID cycle. And calling it even a cycle is glib because we don't know when it's going to end or if it will end. So it's, that unknown, but sort of being able to sort of pivot and try and stay on top of these changes, which are in such real time and week by week, and it's regional, even within all these markets. And we've seen deglobalization. We've seen sort of national boundaries kind of become very rigid, especially in the European Union. It's really sort of gone back to historical borders, and countries kind of strategizing their responses and their restrictions in silos. So that's kind of been quite interesting. So we sort of have to really be mindful of that, whilst of course sort of thinking about global brand stories and consistency.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's it causes the brand, they have to respond quickly. And I think, Sam, you probably feel that with your role, with a heavy burden on your shoulder. It's like, you got to look at the data because everything has to, to happen quickly based on data. So it's different production methods, like Kyle said, and many creative versions and fast learnings. And there's a lot to consider in a very, very short time and to execute. So I want to have some time for the Q&A. So one last questions for the three of us. What do you think is going to stick, and what do you think is going to go away? And I can just start with a quick thing of kind of like a recap of what we just said, and I'll give you guys the stage to say what you think. I think the time, context, and location that we talk about is going to have a huge importance, a little bit more than the mass communication going forward. I think audience segmentation will be something that brands and data companies will look at again, and it's going to change, right? The data points that you look at and how you build your audience, how do you talk to them, it's going to be a little bit different than your usual DMP audience segmentations. And I think brands re-examining their roadmap of what's really important, where and how much should we invest in each of the priorities that we have right now going forward. I think that's going to get a complete new look. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I can go. So I think that nothing is brand new here. It's just, I think it's really brought a lot of things to the surface and really expedited them. So as I mentioned, digital transformation with brands that were a little bit more analog or a little bit more archaic in some of their workings, that's going to stick, because even after the crisis, we're going to emerge very, very differently. And the return is going to be very gradual. I'm desperate to go to a bar, but equally, if they open tomorrow, I wouldn't be there. So, I think there's definitely going to be a sort of staged return to whatever, the future or the next normal looks like. To your point about audience segmentation, I think that's going to be really, really important. We talked about location. I think that's going to be a far greater factor than some demographics, like gender, for example, because, the shared experiences are now based on where you are above anything else. So I think that's really important. And but creating for that. So Sam mentioned DCO, dynamic content optimization. I think that's going to be really key. Another thing, I guess, again, it was there before, but it's exploded even more so. Gaming and esports, that's its own webinar. But look at the Fortnite event with Travis Scott. That was nuts. And so I think the switch to those types of platforms is going to stay. That's a generational thing as well, but not exclusively so. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to stick, but I don't think anything has actually been born from this. I just think it's kind of forced a lot of sort of digital evolutions much quicker than they would have happened organically.
Yeah, I think we could go into kind of some of the more cultural components of health and wellness, affordability, economics, and we could talk for a whole other session probably about stuff that maybe we're not the three best people to talk about. But I would say from a global marketing standpoint, the two things that I see really kind of hitting home that have worked for us that I think we're going to stick with and try to innovate more so than before is just the means of learning quickly in a local market and then building to scale that same type of approach in other countries, other regions, and growing based off of those kind of KPIs that matter. You could look at that from our live streaming approach that we've been doing. You can look at that from how we're doing the Save the Pub initiative, which Oz brought up, which is can we build websites across, I think, over 15 different countries worldwide where people can purchase a gift card that we match. So they pay $50, they get $100 worth of a gift card that they can use at their favorite bar, that bar gets that cash right in hand right there. Our ability to do all that was being able to launch one place nimbly, quickly, the word that we were hearing everywhere, add with agility, and then see if that really had legs, why it resonated, and build and go and move and scale from one country to the next. That type of centralized global approach that we've learned from connecting all of our markets, and it's really given some positive results to the business. And then I would say the second thing is the hunt for especially in FMCG or CPG, to be full funnel marketers. It's on, right? I mean, everyone's talked about it. We talked about what's being brought to the front. The idea that the bottom of the funnel is too far away from CPG. It's never been closer now with the emphasis on e-com coming into our labs, right? And luckily, again, we have ZX helping us there with all the great companies that we have globally, whether it's Zay Delivery in Brazil or Beerhawk in the UK. That integration across bottom of the funnel to top of the funnel and in between across all of our comms planning and strategies, it's a must-have now. We have to perfect it. We have to get it right, because no longer can we just say we're an upper funnel marketer and hope that the downstream occurs from looking at an MMM model or an attribution model and saying that we drove offline retail sales or in-bar sales, right? We have to connect everything better, faster than before.
Yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, guys, we're recording this session, so soon we'll know how accurate we are and what's going to stick and what's going to go away. I'd like to take a few minutes that we got left to answer some of the questions that the audience brought up. The first one is how has the consumer mindset changed when it comes to interacting with brands?
How has the consumer mindset changed when it's come to interacting with brands?
Comes to interacting with brands. Sam, you want to take a...
Sure. I mean, from what we've seen, again, we get this from a research and kind of insights point of view, right? But we track sentiment, we track all sorts of social listening metrics to try to validate what is working and what is not. And I think it's clear that being tangible, relevant, but more importantly, being authentic and providing kind of a purpose right now is more important than ever before. Throwing out an ad to them about Dilly Dilly right now for Bud Light is not going to be as important or meaningful to them as if we were to actually try to fix something in this crazy world we're in right now, or at least provide help where we can, right? So I think you have to draw this purpose-led approach that has to be authentic and real and tangible to the company, and that's critical. And I think to an extent, you have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't just throw your brand out in people's faces in a manner that's not authentic and unbelievable, because we've seen some backlash occur to brands, celebrities, this happening. So I think consumers are they're not looking away for branded messaging right now. I think they're just looking for branded messaging to be more relevant, more empathetic to what's going on, but also to stand out, to do something new that provides them value that that hasn't kind of happened in the marketplace before. There's that YouTube clip that's, I think, notorious now, that shows all the brand advertising that looked the same for about a week or two with all the COVID related ads.
Yeah.
You know what? That was everyone moving at speed, because we all wanted to do what we could to get messaging out there, and how you could help the Red Cross, how you could help Feed America, how you could help all these organizations. Now we're into the next step where there are still problems that exist from before. There are still problems that exist that need to be fixed now, that are new. How can the brands be impactful and meaningful in an authentic manner that's true to help everyone provide utility, and also true to the brands themselves? So I think that's what consumers are really trying to do with their brands, and they're interacting. They're going online more than ever before, and we're getting some great feedback.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's a very fine line between leadership and the brand. I mean, ABI is a great example, because obviously the resources and, the facilities they had to be able to evolve like their, manufacturing from one thing to something very different, but critical is fortunate. So that's a great fit. I think sometimes what people don't want is to be preached to. And I think that, it needs to feel authentic, as Sam said. Some of the brand messaging I've seen is just doesn't feel quite real. It feels as if they are, brands are doing things because they feel like they need to. But if it doesn't either fit with your brand or your tone or what you actually do, like your core business, then it kind of can look sort of tokenistic. And people are very, very shrewd and savvy these days, and they'll call you out on it, and they'll do it publicly now. There's a lot more scrutiny. It can be pretty shocking. But it's fair. It's democratic.
I think there's value in everyone trying to do good, right? I'm not going to go out and say that people shouldn't be trying to help, or brands shouldn't be trying to help. They all should. But where we're seeing it really resonate the most, right, is to Kyle's point, is that where it intuitively makes sense, and that you can really drive more of an impact than other companies might be able to, or other brands might be able to, because of what you stand for, what you've done already, and what your infrastructure is.
Yeah, and I think you got to be very careful. Sometimes the intentions are all good, but the execution lacks, and that can, like we said at the beginning, that can kill a brand. And I think, at least ABI standpoint, I think you guys made a quick shift from just saying we're in this together into something's like, okay, we're going to provide, we're going to try and contribute what we can. We're going to help our consumers. We're going to keep our businesses alive and our partners alive, and doing a lot of initiatives, which is great. And that's exactly, I think, the speed and the adjustments that we're talking about. We'll push a few more minutes because we have a lot of questions. So I'll try another question in terms of production, maybe, Val, into a little bit into your segment right now. So yeah, production and crisis time is always interesting. So how will brand creative messaging keep up with reality, morphing from disease/shutdown to recovery, open up? So basically, again, you guys need to start producing a lot of different content which usually takes a lot of time, right?
Yeah. And
back and forth. Now things are changing from week to week. And like we said, different audiences, different shoots, different versions.
Yeah.
You guys adjust to that.
Yeah, and I teased a little bit about the return to sort of, for example, live action, which is obviously only one type of production. I mean, that's still very, very limited. Like, yes, we're able to do a little bit more than we were 2 weeks ago and 2 weeks before that, etc. But still a fraction of, before any of this. So it's, you definitely have to apply other tools. We're seeing a lot of either influencer content. We have a huge influencer division within us, IMA, and they've never been busier because, it's a very safe way to produce. User-generated content, similar in some regards, but obviously a little bit scrappier around the edges. So, these types of things are instant, or at least very, very quick turnaround, and can be responsive to, real-time, geopolitics, really, because that's what a lot of this is. And then the impact that is having on the way that people are living their lives and what they're able to do, and what types of goods and services, there's a demand for them to consume or purchase or experience, or just even to learn about, or how to entertain themselves. So, you know, it's those types of ways I think are interesting. You know, we did see a real shift towards a lot of animation and design work, just in terms of, you know, again, very sort of remote friendly mechanisms of producing content. A lot of digital experience, a lot of AR, like we do so much AR now. And obviously, you know, I think there are a lot of people at home spending a lot of time on their devices. Yeah, I mean, many of us did anyway, but I think device use is even worse now. And you know, like kids are actually being encouraged to just sit in front with an iPad all day, where, you know, to give us a moment. So, you know, things like that have really changed. And so a lot of people are creating a lot more content sort of in that space. And again, it's not super quick turnaround, but there are ways and means of getting things done a lot quicker. I have production values, or at least the scrutiny, maybe been sort of eschewed a little bit for speed and relevance of messaging. I would say so. I don't think we're going to look back and see like any beautiful work in terms of visuals, maybe, but definitely in terms of storytelling and in terms of obviously the human side. And I think that next year there'll be some really incredible stuff. You know, looking back, fingers crossed, on such a crazy year.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, we're seeing some sort of like, you know, back to the basics. The message is really important. You can have I wouldn't say lower the quality of the overall execution, but, you know, getting it in time in a way without too many innovative formats. It's all about the basic. It's like, you know, you gotta find your consumers where they are right now. It's easier probably to get them because everybody at home under the same Wi-Fi network using more or less the 2 or 3 devices that you can know that they're using. And it's important to keep delivering them the messages you want to deliver and be able to update those messages real quick and create more and more content. That leads me to the last question that we'll take today. Has the crisis changed the need from innovative ad units that might be interactive or capture first-party data, requiring time to set up, to a more simple messages that don't require such setup time? Sam, maybe we'll start with you. Have you seen something from the data? Again, the first-party data, you know, obviously brands have a lot of efforts to collect that type of data to better serve the.
Yeah, I think the creative component in ad units, I mean, to be honest, a lot of our if you look at what our US CMO has said publicly, like, we're not in advertising mode right now. Things are a bit different. So those traditional ad units that Bud Light, Michelob Ultra, a bunch of our brands were, or even acquisition units on Facebook lead ads or something like that, that we try to use to build our first party database. While they're important, they're not really what we're going out to the market with right now. We're trying to deliver content that really first and foremost drives reach to the initiatives that we think are driving an impact for consumers. And that's really twofold, right? That's the things that we're hoping to help, like kind of our ideas for good per se, which is, and I tell my data leads in all the markets when we talk about these digital products and apps that we put up in record time, that first and foremost, our goal is to get this out and to help people, right? We can focus on the data capture, of course, privacy laws abiding and everything, of course, but we can focus on the data capture and optimization and all that, and on our CDP and our DMP once we were up there and we're actually helping consumers, right? And we can see that with our Tienda Circo platform in Mexico and Ecuador and Colombia and a bunch of other places. But I do think that, again, I mean, this is emphasizing the need that everyone has been talking about, the need for a proprietary first-party data asset in the business ever since ITP and all these changes have been happening in GDPR and the privacy landscape, right? That's not changing. I do think that we are looking, and Kyle was talking about kind of creativity being so important. We are looking for creative mechanisms that will help us be relevant and that will also give us the opportunity to interact with consumers in new ways and new opportunities, right? Because everyone is on their phone more, they're on their computers more, they're on their tablets more, and they're looking for interaction, they're looking for things to do. So if there are means that are valuable, that are creative, that are innovative, that allow us to have that interactive mindset and to potentially and compliantly, of course, gather that information, we're going to be looking into it. But right now, I think we're still cognizant that the way we're getting our messages out there are very much organic to start, and then we look into seeing if there's potential for additional reach to help the people at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I can add from our perspective, you know, as the ones that actually know what's running inside each experience that is served to the individual consumer. We're seeing a lot of growth in the need for that loop back of data. Okay, what do you see? What actually worked? What people got? What people engage with eventually because they saw different experiences, but you know they reacted to one of them. So we're gathering the data and looping it back to the brands to make sense out of what's actually working on what audience, in which location, at what time of the day. And I think that's crucial. That's crucial because eventually, you know, we're talking about enriching first-party data, but right now it allowing brands to react and change and adjust.
Yeah, e-commerce, I mean, is definitely a means of advertising and advertising for e-commerce that is helping us in that first-party data front, right? I mean, the fact that in the US and other countries, some countries have been more restricted, but some have actually opened up and allowed for more online beer distribution and things of that nature. That has opened up the pathways for us to think about how we can leverage creativity and different ad units and things of that nature from our brands, focusing on our e-commerce partners, the ones we own and the ones that we don't own, and that our partners, our e-retail partners and things of that nature. So that, of course, is in CPG more often than not a small part of companies' business, but this crisis is showing what it could potentially be moving forward, and that will ask us the questions as to what are the right means of being creative and building brands in those types of e-commerce landscapes, and also with the advertising that promotes e-commerce, and the iteration and versioning will be important with that.
Great. Great. Guys, we're about 10, 12 minutes over our time. The conversation, you know, got us through, and it's a lot of questions here. We'll gather all those questions and we'll see and try maybe to post something or publish something that will answer some of the questions. These are great questions that we have here. I want to thank you both for participating here today. The discussion was awesome. It was great to get some insights from, like I said, a triangle of brand, production, and execution. And I want to thank our audience, and stay safe and be well.
Cool.
Thanks, Oz. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, Oz. Cheers.
Stay safe,
Take
stay
care.
healthy.
Bye. Go beyond.